Welcome back to the Camilla Tominey Show on GB News. Joining me now is the former head of the British Army, Lord Dannatt. Lovely to see you this morning, Lord Dannatt. Can we just talk? I don't know if you caught my interview with Ian Duncan-Smith earlier, but he was being quite critical of Steve Witkoff. This is the envoy to President Trump for Ukraine. First of all, because he couldn't name 5 Ukrainian territories under Russia's control, but also for criticising Starmer's coalition of the willing as posture and pose. What do you make of that interview he's given to Tucker Carlson?
Well, Camilla, good morning. Steve Witkoff is one of those people who is manifestly out of his depth on the world stage, masquerading as an envoy of the American president. We all know that he's just a chum of Donald Trump's. They play golf together. He's a businessman. He's the sort of person that Trump likes. But he's out of his depth, and talking on that radio show just indicated, because he couldn't mention, he talked about 5 places, well, it's 4 oblasts, and Crimea is completely separate. So we have to take sort of things that he says with a pinch of salt. But the trouble is, it's dangerous. And yes, they are listening to Putin, they're talking to Putin, they're recycling Putin's arguments. And frankly, it's just undermining day by day the position of Zelensky, the position of Ukraine, which is worrying in itself. But frankly, it's worrying for the security of Europe. And that's something we should all be extraordinarily concerned about.
It does strike me as bizarre that this is, the US president's kind of point man on Ukraine and Russia, and he doesn't even know the geography of the area. What's your analysis of Donald Trump's handling of Vladimir Putin? We haven't spoken since that 90-minute phone call. Trump emerges seemingly victorious, saying it's wonderful that they've come to this deal on not attacking energy and other infrastructure. It's not a ceasefire, though, is it?
No, it's not a ceasefire at all. A 90-minute conversation out of which a few shreds have emerged. I mean, I think, again, this is Trump trying to be the businessman, trying to be the deal maker, trying to indicate that actually his friend and his business associate, Vladimir Putin, he can do business with. But it's worse than smoke and mirrors. It's downright dangerous. And as you were discussing with Ian Duncan-Smith, the only element that came out of that conversation was this very marginal ceasefire point about not attacking infrastructure. And Ian Duncan-Smith was actually quite right, because this is now a point of vulnerability for Vladimir Putin. The longer-range weapons that the Ukrainians are using very successfully are starting to do real damage to the Russian economy. And I think there's a wider point there, that after 3 years, and actually longer than that, because sanctions started long before that, there is an accumulative effect which is being felt by the Russians, not the least of which, of course, also is the effect of what's happening to them on the battlefield. Yes, people say in one breath, actually, the Russians are doing quite well, but my goodness, their casualty rate is huge. Reasonable estimates now are that they've lost 250,000 dead, about 1 million injured as well. Those are huge figures. So we mustn't be suckered by what we're hearing from Trump's envoys, effectively spouting Putin's language. But bear in mind that Putin is taking some pressure as well.
Lord Dannatt, you just described Vladimir Putin as one of Donald Trump's friends. I mean, is that how you view their relationship, one of friendship between the US president and the Russian president?
Well, friendship is probably going too strongly, but Trump would like to see Putin as someone he can do business with, a colleague in the business world, if you like. And perhaps that's a little bit stopping short of calling him a friend. But he believes he can deal with him man-to-man, conversation, open conversation, and that they can meet mutually beneficial objectives. And the trouble is, those mutually beneficial objectives are at the cost of Ukraine's sovereignty, Ukraine's independence, and by extension are very damaging to security and peace in Europe. And that is the thing that we should be really concerned about, and concerned that Trump is taking the United States progressively away from Europe, thereby weakening NATO, and thereby again playing into Putin's agenda. Bear in mind, as Ian Duncan-Smith was saying, scrape Putin to the core, you get an unreformed KGB colonel whose beloved Soviet Union and Warsaw Pact was defeated in the late 1980s by the solidarity of NATO and the solidarity of the West, underpinned by America, and of course led by Margaret Thatcher and Ronald Reagan at the time. That's what Putin would most love to damage and to shatter and to break now that cohesion in the West. And that's really damaging for us Europeans.
Talking of European security, can we just have a chat about Heathrow? I think at the moment the government's still investigating, along with the security services, as to whether there was anything suspicious about the fire, whether it may have been sabotage. I'm getting the increasing impression that they think not. However, are you concerned about the vulnerability of some of our critical infrastructure?
Well, I think the answer after the Heathrow episode of a few days ago, one has to say yes. It is quite incredible that one substation could be taken down or come down. We'll have to wait for the negotiation to see whether there was a malign hand in there, but have the effect of closing Heathrow Airport with the huge disruption. Now, if I was a KGB operative, I would be looking around at other weak points in this country to decide where I might launch an attack, because that episode that happened at Heathrow, if it was a malign operation, was a very clever one. It was a very well targeted one and had a demonstrative effect. Now, whether it was an accident or whether it was sabotage, we don't know. The authorities are suggesting it was an accident, but it does underline the need for greater resilience in so many aspects of our national infrastructure, and attacking the power grid and attacking our cybersecurity, or preserving our cybersecurity. These are other areas that we need to invest very heavily in and be very cautious about.
Yes, I mean, there may be a call now, considering the climate that we're living in, with everything going on the world stage, of perhaps having more of a military presence at some of these key critical infrastructure building sites. Do you think that would be a good idea? May not have enough troops to cover the ground.
Well, Camilla, you rather answered your own question there.
Yeah.
We certainly haven't got the troops to do that. But go back to the days of the Cold War. We had key installations and troops were earmarked to protect them. So the principle is probably right. But I think that I think that that's probably not the answer at the present moment. It's actually not practical at the present moment with the number of troops that we haven't got. But I think a very careful survey needs to be done of where the critical nodes are in our national infrastructure and make sure that they are well protected, and to make sure also that there is redundancy, that if this thing goes out, then something else can cut in. And whether it's power stations, whether it's all the critical aspects of our national infrastructure need to be looked at very carefully, and redundancy thought through extremely carefully.
Lord Dannatt, we need to leave it there, but thank you very much indeed for joining us this morning.
Thanks, Camilla.
Thank you.